Hello, everyone. Welcome to Zygote Press virtual closing reception for our current exhibition. I'm Brittany Hudak. I'm Zygote's programming coordinator, and I'm here with Arron Foster, artist and curator of our current exhibition, Genius Loci, Toward an Understanding of Place. And you probably haven't seen the show unless you've seen it online, because unfortunately, this show was slated to open on March 13th, I think it was, so about 2 days before the shutdown began, and it was slated to close at the end of April, but we extended it a little bit so that we could do this virtual component and ask Arron some questions and take a closer look at some of the pieces in the show. So here we are in our masks at the very first virtual closing reception for Zygote Press, and obviously, Arron, COVID has impacted this show very specifically, but can you speak a little bit about the challenges that you faced during this pandemic personally? Like, has it influenced your practice in any way?
It's been, it's been a mixed blessing, I think, in some ways, and I hate to say that because it's been such a negatively impactful thing for so many people, but I'm an educator as well as an artist, and I teach printmaking, and all of my classes went online. And so we had to scramble very quickly to figure out how to help students recreate to the extent possible the print studio at home, which is a real challenge for even myself. I mean, I had certain advantages, I think, as a professional that some of my students didn't have. So there's just been a lot of thinking on your feet and trying to make do with less. And I think that some of those restrictions have been hard, but they've also been freeing in a way, because they've allowed you to essentialize and think more about what's really important. What can I do with what I have? And I think for me, it's encouraged a sort of resourcefulness and a way to think outside the box a little bit.
Totally. We're definitely all learning some life lessons right
Yeah.
now.
Yes.
So speaking of place,
Yes.
I think the most literal manifestation of place is probably this series of works, which clearly is called A River Runs Through It.
Yeah.
So this is clearly the river
Right.
impression, but
Yeah.
of course my question is this a specific river? Is this a specific place? And can you talk a little bit about how these prints reflect that place?
Yeah, it is a specific river, it is a specific place. Over the course of the past year, I've been living and working in Athens, Ohio. A big part of the Athens ecology is the Hocking River. A lot of my work lately has been sort of centered on watersheds. This body of work kind of reflects our relationship to the Hocking River. So all of these images are original photographs of mine that were converted into cyanotypes and hybridized with screen print in multiple layers. They're meant to kind of reflect some of the, I think, footprint you see of human kind of interaction with this river. The river itself has been physically moved. It's one of the largest kind of projects of the Corps Engineers in Ohio. It was a massive feat. And what they did was they changed the entire course of the river. They moved the river so that it didn't flood Ohio University anymore. And so advantaging the university, it was somewhat of a disadvantage to the river. The river has struggled for several decades now with pollution, just overuse, complications of human interaction. And so the colors were supposed to be both, the color, the sort of tone, everything about it was supposed to be this sort of bittersweet, right? I like that idea a lot of, sort of lacing the aesthetic with a little bit of poison, I guess. And so some of these colors reference some of the pollution that kind of comes from the river and some of the things that are happening there, and some of them are meant to be more hopeful and optimistic, and I think both exist in that landscape.
So Arron, can you tell me a little bit about genius loci and this concept and how it relates to the show?
Yeah, I mean, genius loci is a concept that goes really far back in both Eastern and Western thought and philosophy. And in its original form, I think it meant more sort of like a spiritual relationship to place. But in its more kind of contemporary affect, it means like the ethos or character of a place. And I think both Tressa and I, and I don't want to speak out of turn for Tressa, but I think that we both use really intimate dialogue with place to encourage, conversation and sort of sensitivity to place that borders on stewardship and ecological thinking, right? So we're all both very invested in kind of mining our own environment for those things that are sort of endemic or important to a place, to us, as a point of celebrating or highlighting those things, and then encouraging people to think more intimately about their environment, their world.
So behind you is an installation of artist books that you created. Can you tell us a bit about them, and more specifically, why you chose to exhibit them this way?
Right.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have a long list of kind of artistic influences, of course, that maybe work in a similar fashion or a similar vein. And I think for me, what I'm really interested in, one of the things I love about print is the idea of being able to mine the multiple, right? To like use multiple small things to come together to a larger whole, right? I think like that's one of my interests in community as well, that we're all these individual spheres and we come together to make a sort of statement or impact or, influence. For me, I think it would have been too flat-footed to break or to sort of present it all as one vista, right? I think that in part that edges in on ideas of like the sublime and those sorts of kind of connotations that go back for a very long time. I wanted you to be able to sort of experience the gestalt, right? To kind of have to put it together, to piece it out. This too was drawn from the landscape in and around Athens. It was imagery taken from original photography, taken alongside the Hocking River again. One of the things I was really enamored with when I first moved to Athens was these really intense sunsets. They were lovely and they were captivating, and they were also very melancholic, and that was just intuitively kind of responding to them. After researching a little bit and realizing that these really like dramatic skyscapes had a lot to do with pollution and sort of poor air quality,
right.
They became even more kind of intriguing on that front.
Right.
And so they became again this sort of bittersweet mixed metaphor for our relationship or lack of relationship maybe with our environment. That
Right.
So I think for me, it would have been, again, I think really simplistic to just present it all as one image that you could easily consume. I wanted you to have to sort of walk it a little bit, and as you walked, maybe hopefully consider more and more about what you were seeing and sort of play with that tension of near and far.
Right. So this series behind us, titled Stars to Burn, each features what I would call like a portrait of water. So I'm assuming, by talking about how much place is important to you, that each one of these is a specific locale. And again, we see the ombre, which is something that is indicative of sky, and then this geometric shape, which to me looks like my star chart. Mm-hmm. Am I right about that?
Very close, yeah.
Close? Okay,
yeah.
So each one has its own kind of character and personality, but are these actual transcriptions of place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These were some of the first sort of larger scale things I worked on when I first relocated to Northeast Ohio. I moved from Athens, Georgia to Kent, Ohio in the sort of fall of 2017. And I am born and bred Appalachian, right? I grew up in the mountains, and I really ground myself personally through direct interactions with nature. I love to hike. I need to get out, and I need to feel at home in anywhere that I am, and that's one of the ways I do it. I had grown up as a bit of a history buff, knowing about the Cuyahoga River and its sort of again bittersweet kind of fraught relationship with environmental regulation and ecology and sustaining human development and all of these things. And so I was really fascinated. It was I was actually a little starstruck in a way. It was kind of a chance to interact with something that I'd only really read about. So for the first few months that I was here, at least once, if not twice a week, I would intentionally hike the same path along the river, starting off from my home, going down to the riverfront, and then sort of charting this different, but each time the path kind of remained the same. So this sort of geometric linear pattern is supposed to be a sort of drawing of types of the path that I would take as I kind of hiked along the river. And then each vignette is a different, again, thinking about the title of this show, Genius Loci, it's, rather than take a sort of step back from the river and try to kind of stereotype it or generally capture it, it was really important to me to kind of look at it as almost like an entity or a being or a form to be studied. And so these are the river's portraits, right? And these colors are a direct reference to the palette of colors I saw in the river at that time or during that given day. And so they're supposed to have a somewhat kind of relationship between the portrait and the ombre beneath it.
Right. Oh, there's another artist in this show, not just Arron, Tressa Jones, whose work is behind me. Can you tell me a little bit about how this show came about, how you know her, and how you know Zygote?
Yeah.
How this came together?
Yeah, I think the big word there would be community. I think Zygote being such a community-oriented place, I was a recent kind of transplant to the Cleveland area, but I had known about Zygote even before I moved here and was really enamored with it and made a lot of effort to kind of try to connect to the place. And then following up on that community theme, for all you printmakers, it's really important to go to these conferences. And Tressa's a person who I met through the Mid-American Print Conference. She may tell a slightly different version of how this came together organically or inorganically, but at a more recent conference, we talked about her relocating to Pittsburgh, and I've always really loved and admired Tressa's work and saw a lot of connection between things she was interested in and I was interested in, and I was already here, so we started a conversation, and that conversation sort of organically morphed into a proposal to show here at Zygote, which we're super thankful that you all took this opportunity to show our work and kind of give us the space. From there on, it was just really about dialogue and conversation and a lot of emails back and forth and kind of riffing, so.
Oh, there's another artist in this show, not just Arron, Tressa Jones, whose work is behind me. Can you tell me a little bit about how this show came about, how you know her, and how you know Zygote? How this came together?
Yeah, I think the big word there would be community. I think Zygote being such a community-oriented place, I was a recent kind of transplant to the Cleveland area, but I had known about Zygote even before I moved here and was really enamored with it and made a lot of effort to kind of try to connect to the place. And then following up on that community theme, for all you printmakers, it's really important to go to these conferences. And Tressa's a person who I met through the Mid-American Print Conference. She may tell a slightly different version of how this came together organically or inorganically, but at a more recent conference, we talked about her relocating to Pittsburgh, and I've always really loved and admired Tressa's work and saw a lot of connection between things she was interested in and I was interested in, and I was already here, So we started a conversation, and that conversation sort of organically morphed into a proposal to show here at Zygote, which we're super thankful that you all took this, opportunity to show our work and, kind of give us the space. From there on, it was just really about dialogue and conversation and a lot of emails back and forth and kind of riffing, So.
Tressa Jones here, speaking about my recent exhibition with Arron Foster at Zygote Press titled Genus Loci, Toward Understanding of Place. And I'm going to speak a little bit about my creative work and walk you through the pieces I have in the exhibition. So broadly speaking, I would say my creative interests are strongly influenced by place and a place's ability to communicate about the human condition, and more specifically about the passage of time, and with that, the experiences of longing and loss. And I think printmaking is an excellent way to communicate these things because it requires a lot of time to create a print. There is a lot of, it's very labor intensive, and also because the product that we're creating as printmakers is tactile in quality, a lot like the world we exist. There's a really interesting nuanced physical nature to a hand-pulled print. And when I was creating the work for this exhibition, I really spent some time contemplating my current place physically, and that being in a new to me city, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and also as a new mother, as being a new place in my life, and the time of my life of experiencing that. So I wouldn't necessarily say these considerations are overtly visible in the work, but they were definitely on the forefront of my decision making, and definitely a big part of my subconscious when I was creating it. So the first piece I'm going to speak about is titled Views. It's 8 screen prints, and they were all originated from the same larger print, but then cropped to present changing views of that print. And I selected a circle for the cropped shape because I wanted it to resemble a sort of porthole, maybe zooming in on a larger section of the frames, maybe similar to how we look out the same window day after day, and although our overall view seems to be the same, there are subtle variations that need to be noted and that are worth paying attention to. I'm working with muted colors here to communicate a sort of sense of calm, but also a sense of aloneness or loss or longing that goes with that experience of the passage of time. Murmurs and Hope, the larger piece of mine in the gallery, is a sort of elaboration or continuation of a larger body of work that I have been working on, that is an investigation into the color blue, and using blue as a metaphor for this experiences of longing and loss, and also the passage of time. The orientation of this piece, being a long horizontal series wrapping the gallery corner, is meant to resemble a sort of horizon line and to communicate deep space within the gallery. And I wanted to use this horizon line and attempt to create space to also bring about a sense of hope. And because I see hope as being a significant part of the unknown. With the unknown, there's always that element of hope that's present. The screen printed sound wave marks on these pieces are from audio recordings of my daughter's voice. As she begins to develop language, I've been cataloging her speech as a way of recording her growth and recording a timeline of her life. And the third piece in the exhibition is titled 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are blind embossments of a folded piece of paper. And I see this as speaking fairly directly to this idea of passage of time, because this piece was an exploration into the human, a human gesture of passing time. In this instance, folding a piece of paper and marking time by that gesture of folding paper. And place memory, how humans experience memories, are often recorded as textures, colors, and patterns. And so here I think having texture and color present, marking this sort of physical recording of time, is significant. So those are the 3 pieces I have in the exhibition, and I just wanted to say thank you to Arron Foster and Zygote Press for all the work you've put into making this exhibition a reality, and also the extra work that you put into navigating these uncertain times. And wishing you all a safe and well weekend, and thank you for taking time to hear a little bit more about my work.
I have been thinking about how the concept of place has changed very dramatically in the past few months, and being stuck in one location, you know, under quarantine, and my relationship also to the outdoors has changed greatly. Has it for you, and do you view this show a little bit differently now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an understatement for me to say that all of us have been so dramatically impacted, and absolutely it's made me reassess again my relationship to the word place. I think definitely, right? What is my place is a question that you could look at from so many different vantage points right now. What is my place within society? What is my society's place within the world? And how are we all responding to this experience that is impacting everyone? But I think on a sort of more micro level, I guess it's made me more kind of keenly aware of my intimate surroundings being like so restricted, right? So, you know, like I said, I love getting out and being in nature, but I feel a responsibility to my, you know, fellow, you know, Ohioan and, you know, everyone else, that I don't go too far out, right? So I have 2 kids, and this has been really tough on them. And it's a lot of hard conversations, and it's unrealistic to expect them to stay within the confines of our very tiny home. And so we have to get out. And so those walks around our neighborhood, which is all they really tantamount to, have become really crucial kind of to all of us, right? You know, they are much needed mental health breaks. They're an opportunity to get away from the screen-based world that we've all been forced into. And they're a chance to sort of put on pause some of the sort of existential dread that's kind of crept into everything, and still celebrate just the machinations of the little things like spring, right? Like still enjoying the fact that things are beginning to bloom and animals are sort of more active, and, you know, that we can, you know, kind of enjoy those things. And so it's made me really kind of connected to place in a very different way in some ways, but not fully, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to be looking at everything differently for a very long time. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%.
So thank you.
Well,
thank you so
Thank
much for coming and talking to us. And we're going to feature some dialogue from the other artists included in the show. And thanks for coming to our virtual closing reception here at Zygote Press, everyone. Bye.